There's some stock plugins that are new in Cubase 13, and the one I want to take a look at today is the EQ P1A, which is a Pultec type EQ that sounds pretty nice. And you probably heard of a Pultec type EQ before. I actually made a full video on how to work with the Pultec type EQ. I'm gonna leave the link down below if you want to watch it. And there's several companies that emulate the Pultec EQ, and the most popular is the Pultec EQ P1A by Universal Audio. So what I'm gonna do here is to compare the UAD version with the Steinberg version. Let's check it out. So let's have a quick look at both of those plugins, which are basically Pultec type EQ plugins. So on the left side, I have the UAD version. On the right side, the new EQ P1A by Steinberg, part of Cubase. So for the most part, they do have the same parameters. So if we look at the main knobs here, we have a boost for the low frequencies and an attenuation. And we have the low frequency knob, okay, to choose the frequency you want to attenuate and boost. Same on the UAD side, okay? The only difference is that the low frequency knob are fixed frequencies that goes from 20, 30, 60, and 100 Hertz. On the Cubase side, the low frequency knob is not fixed to specific frequencies, so you can easily select any frequencies from 20 Hertz to 100 Hertz. So these three knobs will work together. Now the boost and attenuation for higher frequencies, so we have basically the same thing for the boost and attenuation, and the high boost is also not fixed frequencies, okay? Opposed to the high frequency knob we have on the UAD side, okay, which are fixed frequencies from 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, and 16 kilohertz. And there's also a bandwidth that will determine the Q factor of the boost. That works the same on both sides. Now the boost, bandwidth, and the frequency selection knob here, they work together, okay? Same on both plugins. The attenuation will work with the attenuation selection knob, which goes on the UAD version from 5, 10, and 20 kilohertz. And on the Cubase side, we can go from 5 to 20 kilohertz without fixed values. So on this side, the UAD version is more faithful to the original hardware. But doesn't matter? You tell me. Now the Pultec EQ will behave differently from your typical EQ plugin that you have inside your DAW. It is very colorful and has a very nice tone to it. And the way you boost and attenuate frequencies is very special. So I'm gonna test this out to compare both plugins if they react the same way. And we'll see if the Pultec EQ found in Cubase is faithful to how a Pultec EQ behaves, okay? I'm going to use a plugin to analyze the EQ curve, and this plugin is called the EQ Curve Analyzer 2. It's by a company called Bertom. It's a friend of mine that suggested me to get this plugin a couple of months ago, so I went on the website, which I'm going to leave the link down below, and this is not sponsored whatsoever. It's actually a free plugin, but you can donate if you want to, which I did on my side. Very simple to use. You add an instance of the EQ Curve Analyzer before the plugin and one instance after the plugin, and this way it will analyze the EQ curve. So if I activate the Pultec EQ by Universal Audio, this is what I get right off the bat on the analyzer. So we have a kind of a boost on level. So the UAD version is slightly louder the minute you just activate it. So what I'm going to do here, there's an output level on both plugins, and I'm going to turn this one down, the best I can, so it sticks at 0 dB. And then what I notice here is at the high end of the frequency curve, I have a kind of a small dip, a very tiny dip. So if I bypass the UAD Pultec plugin, you see that I don't have that dip anymore. And when it's on, I see that small dip. Let me just bring that down in level once again to make sure I'm as accurate as possible. I think this is close enough. So small dip on the top end for the UAD version. On the Steinberg or Cubase version, if I activate it, pretty flat across the board, to the exception of a small hype on the top end frequencies, okay? And that happens, that happens when you emulate a hardware into a plugin. Depending on the hardware you use, the emulation might differ from one plugin company to another. Just to give you an example, I have the IK Multimedia version of the Pultec EQ, and if I activate this one, I have a dip on the low end of the spectrum and also a tiny boost on the top end of the spectrum. So if we go back to the UAD version, I'm going to boost 5 dBs, okay, at 100 Hertz, attenuate 5 dBs again at 100 Hertz, and you see the reaction here, the way it's going to behave. It's not going to cancel itself out. It's going to create a dip in the mid-range, which is quite interesting. I'm going to do the same for the high frequency, so a boost and attenuation. Let's attenuate at 20K, a boost at 8K, and I'm going to replicate the same thing on the Cubase side. So the parameters are pretty much the same, and if I check the EQ analyzer on the Cubase side, this is what it gives me. Okay, let me go back again to the UAD side. So it's very, very close. Very, very close. Okay, it behaves the same way. Okay, without necessarily the exact values, it does give me the same kind of curves, which is the most important. Anyway, so if I go back to the UAD version and bring the low frequency switch to 20, now I'm getting a low mid cut. Almost a low frequency cut at this point at 165 Hertz when I boost 5 dBs of the low frequencies, and I also attenuate by 5 dBs. I'm going to do the same here on the Cubase side. Bring that down to 20 Hertz, and I have the same cut, a bit higher in frequencies. That is the only difference. Okay, so the idea stays the same, but this is where you're going to get a bit of differences from one plugin to another. It's going to depend on the amount of attenuation and boost you get. But just by looking at the analyzer, it is quite close, okay? So what I'm gonna do here, let me just load a preset. On that preset, I have a bit of boost by 3 dBs for the low frequencies and a 3 dB attenuation also at 20 kilohertz, which brings me to a dip straight on the mid-range at around 360 hertz. So I have also a boost at 8K and no attenuation, okay? So I'm trying to replicate that tone on the Cubase side of the plugin, and this is the parameters that I have to get close to what I'm getting with the UAD version. Okay, let's have a quick listen on this mix if I activate the UAD version. Now you can hear the low mid cut that I have on this one and a bit of boost at 8K. So it gives me a more open sound. Okay, I'm gonna listen to this again and then compare it with the Steinberg version. It's very close. Honestly, it's very close. Okay, I can hear a very tiny difference with those parameters. I didn't expect them to sound exactly the same. Okay, I don't think any two emulations will sound exactly 100% the same. Even if you take two exact Pultec hardware, chances are, depending on how old they are from each other, they might sound just a bit different from each other. It's very cool that in Cubase we have access to this type of EQ that is, again, very colorful, very musical, that sounds pretty good when comparing it to the UAD version, which is actually one of the best Pultec emulation out there, to be honest. And we are far from being miles apart. So if you have Cubase 13 and you also have an emulation of the Pultec EQ, compare it on your side and leave a comment below. And also let me know from this video if you can actually hear the difference between the two with the parameters that I have on my side. Note that there's also a second version to the Pultec EQ, which is also available in Cubase 13. And this one is the MEQ 5, which basically focuses on the mid-range. And the Cubase version is this one right here, okay? So they have basically the same parameters and they are as close as the EQP1A are to each other. Again, you can watch this video if you want to dial in even deeper on how to work with the Pultec EQ. And until next time, take care and see you.